Back everyone to the deep dive. Today we're heading back quite a ways, dusting off a story many of us probably heard as kids, but maybe haven't really dug into as adults. We're talking about Daniel in the lion's den. Daniel chapter 6. And let me tell you, this is way more than just, a simple miracle story. It's this incredibly rich narrative about integrity under pressure, about how law works, about faith, all happening during a massive power shift between empires.
That's exactly it. When you really unpack the context, the politics, the legal situation, the spiritual dimension that the sources highlight, it just leaps off the page. It's not just about survival. It's a study in how someone maintains their core convictions when everything, even the state itself, seems designed to crush them.
Right. So our mission today is pretty clear. We want to pull out those really powerful lessons Daniel modeled. Lessons about loyalty, about integrity, especially when things get incredibly tough. Because honestly, this ancient story feels surprisingly relevant to the kinds of pressures people face today, doesn't it? In work, maybe even in public life, or just personal challenges.
Absolutely. And before we jump into chapter 6 itself, it helps to remember something about the book of Daniel overall. The structure is, well, it's not straightforward chronologically. The analysis we're drawing from points this out clearly. It jumps around. You get history, then prophecy, then back to history. It's like looking through binoculars, sometimes focusing near, sometimes far, and it all kind of overlaps.
Okay, so chapter 6 is one of those near historical accounts happening later in Daniel's life. Why put it there in the book?
Well, thematically, it seems deliberately placed as a parallel to chapter 3. Remember Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the fiery furnace?
Oh, right. The other big public test of faith under threat of immediate terrifying death.
Exactly. They're twin stories, in a way, both showing individuals, seemingly small players, caught up in huge historical moments, facing these horrific choices. The core idea seems to be showing God's power working through people who refuse to compromise, point blank. The fire pit, the lion's den, they're demonstrations of God stepping in when his people stand firm.
Okay, that makes sense. Sets the stage perfectly.
Yeah.
So let's get into the specifics of chapter 6. The political world Daniel is living in has changed dramatically.
Massively. We've moved past the Babylonian Empire, Nebuchadnezzar's era, which dominates the early parts of the book. Now we're in the Medo-Persian Empire. The power has shifted. The king here is Darius the Mede.
And that shift wasn't just about swapping one king for another, right? The whole philosophy of rule was different.
Completely different.
Yeah.
Babylon under Nebuchadnezzar was all about assimilation. Force everyone into the Babylonian mold. Change their names, their diet, their education. Remember what they tried with Daniel and his friends early on?
Yeah, total cultural reprogramming.
And the king's word was absolute law. Nebuchadnezzar could decree something one day and reverse it the next. Very volatile, very personal power.
But Persia, they were different.
Generally, yes. The sources describe them as more pragmatic, more tolerant, actually, towards the diverse cultures within their massive empire. They often let conquered peoples keep their customs, even sent them back to their homelands, allowed them to rebuild temples.
Which explains how Daniel, this Jewish exile, could not only survive but actually thrive at the highest levels, even after decades.
Precisely. Daniel's incredibly old by this point, probably in his 80s, maybe even older. He's outlasted the entire Babylonian Empire. He literally interpreted the writing on the wall the night it fell. And yet, he transitioned smoothly into this new Persian administration. King Darius comes in, reorganizes everything, sets up 120 satraps, or governors, across the empire.
Unstructured bureaucracy.
Massive. And then, crucially, he appoints 3 administrators, 3 presidents, or chief officers, over those 120 governors. And Daniel is one of those 3.
Wow. So even under a new regime, his talent was undeniable.
Undeniable. And it gets better. Darius sees something exceptional in Daniel. His competence, his spirit, his integrity. The text says Darius was planning to set Daniel over the entire kingdom. Basically, make him prime minister, second only to the king himself.
Okay, I can see where this is going. That kind of favor breeds jealousy.
Intense jealousy. But before we get to the plot, there's this critical legal difference between Babylon and Persia we have to understand. It's the whole mechanism of the trap.
Right, you mentioned Nebuchadnezzar was absolute. His whim was law.
Yes. But in Persia, it was different. The law was paramount. Persian law, once enacted, was seen as essentially unchangeable, even by the king.
Wait, the king couldn't change his own laws. How does that work?
It sounds strange to us, but it was a cornerstone of their system. It provided stability across this vast, diverse empire. It meant governance, taxes, justice. It was all predictable, reliable, not subject to the king's mood swings. They even called it the law of the Medes and Persians, which does not alter. It was a point of pride, a sign of their reliable rule.
But that very stability, that unchangeable law,
Became the perfect weapon for Daniel's enemies. They realized if they could trick Darius into signing a law targeting Daniel's faith, the king himself would be legally bound to enforce it, even if he desperately regretted it later. His hands would be tied by his own legal system.
wow. So the empire's strength became the instrument for this plot. It wasn't about convincing the king Daniel was bad.
Yeah.
It was about creating an inescapable legal situation.
Exactly. An irreversible contract, you could almost say.
Okay, so let's talk about Daniel himself. His character is central here. The plot against him starts because he's so good at his job and the king recognizes it.
That's the tragic irony, isn't it? The source analysis points out that the trigger wasn't some failure on Daniel's part. It was his success. His promotion or potential promotion sparked the envy. It's a really sobering reminder that sometimes doing well, being elevated, can actually draw the most intense opposition, often from those closest to you professionally.
So these other officials, the other two presidents, and maybe some of the governors, they start digging for dirt.
Oh, they launched a full investigation. They weren't just looking for a minor slip-up. They wanted something serious. Corruption, mismanagement, negligence, anything they could use to discredit him before the king.
And what did this deep dive into Daniel's administration find?
This is just stunning. The text is explicit. They could find no ground for complaint or any fault because he was faithful, and no error or fault was found in him.
Nothing. In decades of high-level government service spanning two empires, that's almost unbelievable.
It really is. It tells you about his absolute integrity. He wasn't just competent, he was honest, reliable, trustworthy. Didn't matter if he was serving a Babylonian despot or a Persian ruler, his standard didn't change.
And this becomes a powerful model, right, for anyone working in, say, a secular company or government today that maybe doesn't share their values. It shows you can operate with excellence and integrity.
Absolutely. And the sources emphasize this wasn't just Daniel being a naturally gifted administrator. It connects back to earlier descriptions of him. Remember, having an excellent spirit, wisdom, understanding.
The spirit of the holy gods, as Nebuchadnezzar's wife put it.
Exactly. Interpreted consistently as guidance from God's spirit. It suggested this divine insight is what enabled him to perform so exceptionally well, to navigate these treacherous political waters for so long. His competence was, in a sense, supernatural.
So his spiritual life fueled his professional excellence.
That seems to be the clear implication. And because his professional record was spotless, completely unassailable.
They had nowhere else to go.
Precisely. They hit a wall. They couldn't find any fault in his work for the king. So they have this moment of realization. They say, and it's chilling, "We shall not find any ground for complaint against this Daniel unless we find it in connection with the law of his God."
They had to pivot. If his service to the earthly king was perfect, they had to target his service to his heavenly king.
It was the only thing they knew he prioritized, even above his duty to Darius. They knew his faithfulness to God was absolute, non-negotiable, and that became the basis for their trap.
Okay, so let's break down the trap itself. It's quite cunning.
Extremely. They go to King Darius and they use flattery. "Oh, king, live forever. All the precedents have consulted together." They make it sound like a unanimous, brilliant idea to bolster his authority.
Playing on his ego, basically.
Totally. They propose this interdict, or firm decree, and the rules sound simple enough on the surface.
What was it exactly?
For the next 30 days, nobody in the entire kingdom is allowed to make a petition, which means pray, ask for anything to any god or man except King Darius himself.
So for 1 month, the king becomes the sole point of contact for any request, human or divine.
Essentially, yes. It temporarily elevates him to this quasi-divine status, a single mediator for everyone.
And the penalty for breaking this temporary rule?
Immediate execution, being thrown into the den of lions.
And Darius, presumably flattered, maybe not thinking through all the implications?
He signs it, and because it's Persian law, once he signs and seals it, it's irrevocable. The trap is set.
Now, this is the moment of truth for Daniel. He hears about this decree. He knows exactly what it means. What were his options? Because surely there were ways around this.
Oh, absolutely. And this is where the modern application gets really sharp. The source analysis lays out several very practical, logical things Daniel could have done to save his own skin.
Like what? What would most people do?
Well, think about it. Pray in secret, right? Just close the window to his upper chamber so nobody sees him kneeling.
Okay, makes sense.
Or just pray mentally. Don't kneel. Don't make a show of it. God knows your heart after all.
Right. Reduce the visibility.
Or maybe reduce the frequency. He prayed 3 times a day. Maybe just cut back for 30 days. Once a day. Once every few days.
Take a temporary leave of absence from his usual routine.
Exactly. Or, hey, just go pray somewhere else. Go to a friend's house out in the country. Just avoid doing it where his enemies are watching. All of these seem like reasonable compromises, don't they? They maintain his private faith while obeying the king's temporary decree.
They seem perfectly logical, self-preserving choices.
Mhm.
But Daniel,
Rejects every single one. He makes no adjustments whatsoever.
what does he do?
The text is very specific. He goes to his house. He goes to his upper room where his windows were open toward Jerusalem. He gets down on his knees 3 times that day, just like always. And he prays, and this is crucial. He gives thanks before his God as he had done previously.
Wow. Open windows, same time, same place, same posture, no compromise. Why? Why risk death over the manner of his prayer if God knows his heart?
Because the decree wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a direct assault on the foundation of his faith. It essentially demanded he violate the first commandment, thou shalt have no other gods before me. For 30 days, Darius was demanding to be that other god, the sole recipient of petitions. Daniel recognized this wasn't about protocol, it was about ultimate allegiance. Kneeling publicly, windows open, was a declaration. My loyalty is to God first. It was an act of obedience to God that necessarily meant disobeying the king's unlawful command in that specific area.
He had to choose who his ultimate master was.
Precisely. Obey God rather than men, as Peter would later say. His public faithfulness was the visible evidence of his inward conviction. Silence or secrecy in this specific context would have amounted to complicity with idolatry.
Okay, let's zero in on that phrase. He prayed and gave thanks. Giving thanks when you know you're about to be arrested and thrown to lions, that seems superhuman.
It's arguably the most powerful moment in the chapter. The sources really emphasize this. Think about our modern lion's pits. Maybe it's a scary medical diagnosis, or losing your job for doing the right thing, or facing intense social pressure. Our first instinct is usually fear, pleading, maybe anger or despair.
Absolutely. Not gratitude.
But Daniel chooses gratitude. Why? Because giving thanks in the face of disaster is an act of profound faith. It's saying, God, I trust your goodness and your sovereignty more than I fear this outcome. My hope isn't in avoiding the lions. My hope is in you, regardless. It's at the beginning of real spiritual warfare, aligning your heart with God's will, even when the circumstances look terrifying. It's trust enacted before the deliverance comes.
That shifts the focus entirely, doesn't it? It's not about manipulating the outcome, but about faithfulness within the trial.
Exactly. The faithfulness is the victory, in a sense.
So Daniel prays, gives thanks, and his enemies.
They were waiting. They saw him, just as they expected. They immediately assemble and rushed off to the king. Did you not sign an interdict, O king? They remind him of the law.
And Darius' reaction. He's not happy they caught Daniel, is he?
Not at all. The text says he was greatly distressed and exceedingly displeased with himself. He realized he'd been manipulated. He valued Daniel immensely. Remember, he was planning to promote him over everyone. The analysis suggests Darius was, relatively speaking, a decent ruler who genuinely liked and respected Daniel, and now he's trapped. Utterly trapped by his own unchangeable law.
So he tries to find a way out.
Desperately. The scripture says he set his mind to deliver Daniel and labored till the sun went down to rescue him. He spent the entire day poring over law books, consulting advisors, looking for any loophole, any technicality, any precedent to save Daniel.
But the accusers wouldn't let him off the hook.
Nope. They came back in the evening, reminding him again. Know, O king, that it is a law of the Medes and Persians that no interdict or statute that the king establishes can be changed. They held his feet to the fire of his own legal system.
So the king is forced to give the order.
He has no choice. He commands Daniel to be brought and cast into the lion's den. But as Daniel is being taken away, Darius says something remarkable to him.
What's that?
He says, "May your God, whom you serve continually, deliver you." It's not a command, it's a hope, maybe even a prayer uttered by a pagan king who has seen something extraordinary in Daniel's faithfulness and perhaps suspects his God is real.
That's incredible. It shows the impact Daniel's consistent witness had, even on the king.
Definitely. Then they throw Daniel in. A stone is placed over the mouth of the den, and it's sealed with the king's own signet ring and also the signets of his lords.
Why the double sealing?
To make it absolutely official and tamper-proof. Neither the king nor Daniel's enemies could secretly intervene during the night. The outcome rested entirely on Daniel and his God. or the lions.
And how did the king spend that night?
In agony. He went back to his palace, fasted, refused any entertainment, no music, nothing. He couldn't sleep. It shows just how much Daniel meant to him, how deeply this whole affair troubled him.
Okay, so the night passes. What happens at dawn?
Darius can't wait. He gets up at the first light, hurries to the lion's den, and he calls out, his voice full of anxiety, "Oh, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions?" Notice he calls him the living God.
He's already processing what might have happened. And does Daniel answer?
He does. His voice comes up from the pit. "Oh, king, live forever." First, confirming his loyalty to the earthly ruler.
Amazing. Then what?
Then he explains. "My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, and they have not harmed me because I was found innocent before him, and also before you, O king, I have done no harm."
Okay, let's pause on that declaration. Innocent before him, God, and before you, O king. Why is that dual innocence so important? Isn't being right with God enough?
It's critical for the impact of the miracle. Being innocent before God means he upheld God's law. He didn't bow to the idolatrous decree. Being innocent before the king means he was a loyal, competent, non-subversive administrator. He wasn't trying to overthrow Darius. He wasn't guilty of treason or corruption. He was wrongly condemned by a flawed human law that conflicted with God's law. This dual innocence makes the miracle undeniable. It shows God acted not just to save a pious man, but to vindicate someone unjustly condemned by the state itself, while affirming Daniel's legitimacy as a servant of that state.
So his civil faithfulness actually amplified the power of his spiritual faithfulness.
Exactly. It left the king and the whole empire with no explanation other than divine intervention protecting an innocent man who is good for the kingdom.
Incredible. So Daniel is brought out completely unharmed. What happens next?
The mood shifts instantly. Relief turns to righteous fury. Darius is overjoyed to have Daniel back, but he knows exactly who engineered this crisis.
The accusers.
Yes. The king gives the command. Those men who had maliciously accused Daniel are brought forward, and the judgment is swift and terrible.
What does he do?
He orders them, along with their wives and their children, to be thrown into the lion's den.
The whole families. That seems harsh to us.
It was actually standard practice in Persian law for treason, collective punishment. It aimed to wipe out the entire line of a traitor. Darius is applying the law of his land here. But then comes the stark contrast. The text adds a chilling detail. Before they even reached the bottom of the den, the lions overpowered them and broke all their bones in pieces.
Wow. So the lions were definitely hungry. They weren't just sleepy cats.
Not at all. It proves the miracle for Daniel was specific and divine. The lions were ferocious. Their mouths were shut for Daniel, but instantly opened for his accusers. The implication is stark. God's protection for the righteous is paired with swift judgment for the wicked. It's salvation and condemnation back to back.
But the story doesn't end with vengeance. Darius takes another step, right? A big one.
A huge one. This experience clearly had a profound impact on him. He moves from personal relief and reverence to public proclamation. He issues a decree for his entire kingdom.
What does this new decree say?
It's astonishing coming from a pagan king. He commands that in all the dominion of my kingdom, people are to tremble and fear before the God of Daniel.
He's mandating reverence for Daniel's God across the empire.
Yes. And listen to how he describes this God. For he is the living God, enduring forever. His kingdom shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall be to the end. He delivers and rescues. He works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth, he who has saved Daniel from the power of the lions.
That's a pretty accurate theological statement.
Isn't it? He gets it. The living God, eternal, sovereign, powerful, rescuer. Through Daniel's unwavering faithfulness, not through war or politics, this powerful pagan emperor is compelled to use his global platform to praise the God of Israel. It's a stunning demonstration of God's sovereignty over all earthly rulers.
So Daniel's personal integrity didn't just save him, it fundamentally shifted the religious landscape, at least officially, of the empire.
That's the power of uncompromising faithfulness. Its influence can ripple out in ways we can't even imagine.
Okay, let's bring this home. How do we apply this ancient story, this lion's pit scenario, to our lives today? Feels very dramatic, very distant sometimes.
Well, the pit itself is symbolic, isn't it? It represents any situation where our faith, our integrity comes into direct conflict with external pressures, where doing the right thing seems to invite disaster.
So maybe not literal lions, but
Yeah.
threats to your job if you don't cut corners.
Exactly. Or pressure to stay silent about something unethical you see at work. Or maybe being ostracized socially, even within your community or family, for holding certain beliefs or moral standards.
It could even be internal struggles, right?
Right.
Like jealousy or conflict within a church or organization, creating a hostile environment. That can feel like a lion's den.
Definitely. Any situation where faithfulness feels dangerous or costly. And Daniel's response is the model, consistency. Remember, he served God primarily, not the king. His allegiance didn't waver whether it was Babylon or Persia, Nebuchadnezzar or Darius. His standard was God's standard, period.
But that choice he made, the public prayer, couldn't he have just prayed privately? When is it okay to compromise on the form of our witness, and when does that become denial?
That's a tough question, and context matters. But the principle here seems to be, when a human demand directly contradicts a command of God, especially one as fundamental as worship, then public consistency becomes essential. The decree forced a choice. Visibly honor Darius as the sole mediator, or visibly honor God. In that specific clash, retreating into privacy could have been interpreted as prioritizing the king's demand over God's. Daniel's open window was a statement about who held ultimate authority in his life.
It wasn't about being needlessly provocative. It was about refusing to comply with idolatry.
Precisely. Maintaining the visibility of his true master, even at great personal cost.
This feels like a good point to bring in the Jesus lens. How does Daniel's experience foreshadow or point towards Christ?
Oh, the parallels are quite striking. First, the innocence. Just like Daniel, Jesus faced intense scrutiny from religious and political leaders desperate to find fault, but Pilate himself had to declare, "I find no guilt in him." Both were innocent before God and man.
Okay, that's clear. What else?
Then there's the imagery of the pit itself, the descent into a sealed, stone-covered place.
Like the tomb.
Exactly. It strongly evokes Christ's burial, his descent, and Daniel emerging completely unharmed, untouched by the power of the lions. The power of death in that context prefigures Christ's resurrection. Leaving the tomb, having conquered death, Daniel's deliverance is like a mini-resurrection, showing victory over what should have been certain doom.
And Daniel's approach influencing through faithfulness, not force.
Yes. He didn't organize a rebellion. He didn't try to lobby Darius beforehand to stop the law. His weapon was obedience to God. It connects directly to Jesus' approach, doesn't it? Pay your taxes, respect authority, render to Caesar. But when that authority demands what belongs only to God, worship, ultimate allegiance, you stand firm. Our real influence, the source material suggests, comes not from earthly power plays, but from that excellent spirit, that God-given integrity and wisdom, empowered by the resurrection. The world might see it as weakness, but it's where true strength lies.
Finally, you mentioned the symbolism of the lion's mouth itself. It plays two roles here.
A stark duality. For Daniel, the righteous one, the lion's mouths are shut. The place of danger becomes a place of miraculous salvation and deliverance.
But for his accusers,
For the wicked, those very same mouths become instruments of immediate, terrifying judgment and doom, open and devastating.
salvation and judgment from the same source.
It's a powerful picture. It mirrors, in a way, the work of Christ. His first coming offered salvation, refuge. His second coming will bring judgment. The lion's den encapsulates both aspects of divine justice and mercy.
So wrapping this all up, what's the absolute core takeaway from this deep dive into Daniel 6?
I think it circles back to that moment of prayer. Daniel's real triumph wasn't just walking out of the den alive. It was his decision before he knew the outcome to kneel, windows open, and give thanks. That absolute faithfulness, that trust demonstrated during the crisis, that was the victory. The miracle deliverance was God's response to that faithfulness. But the faithfulness itself was the critical act.
It prioritizes the process over the outcome, in a way. Fidelity matters most.
Precisely. And the story powerfully shows that even when human systems, laws, decrees seem totally stacked against God's people, God remains sovereign. He can use jealous officials, pagan kings, even flawed laws to ultimately achieve his purpose and, amazingly, often compel those very systems and rulers to acknowledge him.
Which leaves us with a question for you, the listener, to think about. What seemingly unbreakable laws, pressures, or systems in your own world, maybe professional expectations, social norms, even personal habits or fears, do you need to remember are ultimately subject to the sovereign will and power of the living God, just as the law of the Medes and Persians was? Something to consider. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.